It's the battle of the single leg glute exercises. Which is best? In this video, I'm going to roll through the top 20 single leg glute exercises, and I'm going to rank them according to their effectiveness based on my opinion. Now, before I dive into the exercise, I want to mention two things. Number one, we really don't have any longitudinal research on this, so really it's anyone's guess as to what really is best. So I'll be relying on sensations, biomechanical rationale, and my experience as a lifter and coach. And then the second thing I want to point out is that I did not include B-stance exercises. So a lot of you out there like B-stance squats, B-stance hip thrusts, and especially B-stance RDLs, but I omitted them because how do you know how much loading you're putting on one leg? You know, you set a PR. Did you really put more loading on the working leg, or did you just use the stability leg more? That being said, I do love B-stance RDLs. A lot of you love them, but this was really hard to do. In fact, this video is gonna piss off so many of you because you're gonna say, I love that exercise. Why was it number 2 or number 12 or number 18? The fact of the matter is, most of these are amazing glute exercises. In fact, I've probably programmed 18 out of 20 in my Booty by Bret programs. So they're all great glute exercises. Some of them are more great than others. Coming in at number 20, the single leg glute bridge. It's unstable, it's a tiny range of motion. Even if you load it, you're just doing a short squeeze position. You do it and you're like, you feel gypped, you want more range, you want to be doing a hip thrust, not a glute bridge. For this reason, comes in last. Coming at 19 is the pistol squat. And I'll lump in the single leg box squat to this as well because it's basically a variation of the pistol squat. Now the pistol squat is arguably the best bodyweight single leg exercise in existence, but it's a lot of quad. You know, the knee has to go way out over the toe, necessarily making it an amazing quad exercise. So I'm not hating on pistol squats. They're amazing, just not so good for the glutes if you have the option of using loading. Coming in at number 18, the single leg horizontal back extension done off the glute ham developer. It's like the glute bridge. It's all squeeze. You only feel it right at the top. You don't feel any tension at the bottom in the stretch position. And you usually have to use momentum because it's hard to get up there. It's just too exaggerated. You don't grind out the last rep. And something about single leg end range hip extension exercise, you kind of rotate as you squeeze the glute at the top, throwing off the stability. The torque angle curve is too dramatic. You get nothing at the bottom, everything at the top. Therefore, it gets a very poor rank. Next up, we have the sled push. Sled pushes are amazing. They're so functional. They're so awesome. They're great for sprinters, great for athletics, but there is no eccentric phase, which could make it a good thing, but it's also not always easy to standardize. You better use the same sled every time, the same surface. Put your hands in the same position. If you go to a different gym, you have a different surface. There could be more friction, different sleds. Some sleds don't allow for different hand positions. But yeah, when you have a low handle position and you're going all out, it's a lot of glutes, but it's pure concentric, hard to replicate across gyms. Therefore, it doesn't even crack the top 15. Coming at 16, we have this single leg hack squat. I actually like this exercise if you can lean forward a bit. And there are ways to do it where you're leaning forward, but the sled itself is pretty heavy. Even using no load is too challenging, and some people experience knee pain even with a more glute dominant high foot placement. But if you like these, have at them, but there are other machine movements like it that are better. For example, the single leg press. Coming in at number 15, the single leg reverse V squat. These are like step ups where you're angled forward. They're actually amazing, but they're actually too hard at the bottom, so it's hard to even control it as you descend. Typically you see people descend too fast, bring up. When it's so hard at the bottom, you'll see people kind of tilting the pelvis one way. You do want the exercise hard in the stretch position, but there's a sweet spot. And some machines are better suited for the single leg version than others, making it hard to replicate. And for this reason, it does not crack the top 10. Next up at 14, we have the curtsy lunge. And some of you are gonna say, what? I love curtsy lunges for glutes. So do I. You get more stretch when you do them, and then when that knee crosses the midline, you get more stretch in the upper glute max. But couple problems with the curtsy lunge. Number one, people never do it optimally. Some people whip around and you'll see their shin angle move, but you tend to have to go a little bit lighter. So this might place more burden on the upper glute max at the expense of the lower glute max. And we definitely want lower glute max. So don't get me wrong, I love curtsy lunges. You can actually curtsy almost every single leg movement if you wanted to, but that's a general strategy to hit more upper glute max as opposed to lower glute max. And we want all the glute max here. At 13, we have the single leg 45-degree hyper. So it's definitely better than the single leg horizontal 45-degree hyper. And I love the prisoner single leg 45-degree hyper arms overhead, but that's more of a hamstring exercise. Some apparatuses let you bend the knee a little bit, But any way you slice it, it never feels stable. You always feel off a little bit. I do love holding a dumbbell with these, but that end range squeeze, you tend to externally rotate the hips as you move into full hip extension. So end range single leg movements sometimes interfere with that natural rhythm. Therefore, it does not crack the top 10. Coming in at 12, the single leg reverse hyper. I actually love this exercise for athletics. It's super explosive and you don't have that interference because with open chain movements like the single leg reverse hyper and the cable kickback, you do have that ability to turn the foot out or externally rotate as you move into full hip extension. The problem with this is you have to use a lot of momentum. You're never gonna get that grindy last rep because it's more of an explosive swinging movement. And also reverse hyper machines are just rare. You don't see them in many gyms, which is why it comes in at number 12. Number 11, we have the skater squat. Now, if you just do a bodyweight skater squat, that's a quad dominant movement. You're definitely limited by quad strength. But if you brace, if you hold on to something and reach back, now you can make it very glute dominant. It's almost like a step down. It's an amazing glute exercise, but it's hard to gauge your depth on these. What's the difference between a glute dominant skater squat and a glute dominant step up? You just don't touch down, but do you always reach the same depth? In my experience as a coach, most people don't, but it really is super effective. And I hope a lot of you try it out because chances are you're gonna like it. All right, now introducing the top 10. Coming in at number 10 is the single leg good morning, but not the barbell variation. Barbell single leg good mornings would be brutal. It's so unstable. What I'm talking about is the Smith machine variation, and not with the foot straight under the bar, with the foot behind the bar a little bit. When you do it this way, it is absolutely brutal. And you don't do it in a straight leg fashion like a stiff leg deadlift. You do it in a bent leg fashion like a Romanian deadlift. So just treat it like an RDL with the bar on your back and the bar in front of the body a little bit. You're gonna love these, but I'm warning you, these are very brutal, hard to learn, but once you do, it's amazing. Coming in at number 9, the pendulum quadruped hip extension. Now, these are done underneath a reverse hyper. You can do them with a pure bent leg, or you can do them more of a donkey kick style and extend the knee, depending whether you shift your body back or forwards underneath the reverse hyper. These were a staple in my training regimens all the way up until around like 2012. My first decade as a personal trainer, I prescribed a ton of these because I trained people out of my garage gym, and then my first gym lifts in Scottsdale. I didn't have a lot of equipment, so we did these round the clock. And the people loved them, but they are brutal. Most beginners start off with like a 25-pound plate, novices 50 pounds, and some of my clients move up to 3 25-pound plates, but it's so hard to stabilize. You feel it in the core a ton, making it a good functional exercise, but it would be nice to have a little more natural stability. If you do these, be sure to brace on the unit, use a knee pad. I never see these being done, but you can see early in my career, I prescribed a ton of these and the people loved them. Louis Simmons invented the reverse hyper. I always wished I saw him using these because I think these are even better for glutes than reverse hypers, but reverse hyper units are very rare, so you won't see these being done very often. Coming in at number 8, the cable kickback. And some of you might be upset at this. You're like, I love cable kickbacks. So do I. But I think once you see the top 7, you'll agree with my placement. What I love about cable kickbacks, they match your inherent strength curve, meaning when you initiate the movement, you have a little more torque on the hips, a little more hip extension torque requirements. When you move into end range hip extension, the torque requirements diminish. Well, you happen to be 2.5 times stronger at 90 degrees of hip flexion compared to 0 degrees of hip flexion, meaning your hips are stronger in the stretch than in the squeeze because you have more passive elastic force and more leverage in the adductors in deep hip flexion. When you move all the way into the squeeze, now you're relying more on active tension in the glute max. I love them. I love all kickback variations. My favorite is swoopy. You can also do straight leg, you can do high pulley, and you can do kneeling. They're all amazing, but they're best done with higher rep ranges. We mostly do sets of 12, but it's a pain in the butt having to, switch the ankle cuff or wear 2 ankle cuffs and then detach yourself from the cable column and reattach to the others. Let's be honest, it's freaking annoying. The sets last forever. So for that reason, it's number 8, but we do a ton of cable kickbacks in my programs. They're amazing, just not quite as amazing as the next 7. Now, coming at number 7 will surprise some of you. It's the machine kickback. But here's the deal. Many of you will be watching this going, I hate the, glute kickback machine at my gym. And yeah, when you find one that fits your body, it's like gold. So those of you who have one at your gym that fits your body well, you're like, this machine is priceless. I love it. I use it all the time, but it's very rare to have that. My favorite is the Glute Builder kickback machine. It's so smooth. It's so amazing. It moves you through a huge arc. Because your foot's so out in front, IQ push down, then back. It's almost like doing a step down and then a kickback. You're very stable, and there are a lot of other good glute kickback machines on the market. I remember the old school Booty Blaster. It's well suited mainly for taller people. But what I like about the machines, especially the selectorized ones, is it makes for a quicker setup. It's not like the cable variation where it takes forever. So for these reasons, it got a very good placement in the top 7. Coming at number 6 is the single leg hip thrust. Now, if this was a bilateral list, the hip thrust would be number 1 for me. It's my favorite glute exercise. So you might be wondering, why is the single leg version not your number 1 single leg glute exercise? And throughout this video, I've alluded to it. As you rise up and move into full hip extension, there's a natural hip external rotation component. But when you're doing single leg, you can't rotate externally. If you were pushing on this leg, you'd rotate out that way. In the single leg version, you move up and down. You don't get to rotate out. When you do bilateral hip thrust, you see a natural kind of turning out as you squeeze right up to the top. And for this reason, you never see quite as high of glute EMG activity with the single leg variation than you do the double leg. Bilateral hip thrust variations greatly outperform single leg hip thrust variations in glute EMG activity, and it's the same hip range of motion. So that has to mean that bilateral is better for the hip thrust pattern. That being said, you can do single leg hip thrust everywhere. During the quarantine, people were training from home. In my Booty by Bret programs, we were doing 3 sets of 20 just with single leg hip thrusts off a bench. They were brutal. Now, if you have a dumbbell, you can just use a dumbbell on the same side leg, put it off kind of the corner. It works great. Some people love using the Smith machine. And again, as I said in the beginning, you can do B stance too to make it even more stable. In fact, Smith machine B stance is freakishly stable. But when using B stance, how do you really know you're using the working leg? Special mention goes to the landmine single leg hip thrust, which is so awesome, but the setup is brutally annoying. And finally, I love the dual elevated single leg hip thrust. It works a lot of hamstrings. It brings the hammies into it, but at the bottom, it's a lot of tension on the glutes in the stretch position, making it probably second to the pistol squat in terms of like the best single leg exercises for glutes if you're just using body weight. But I digress. Let's move on to the top 5. Coming at number 5 is a single leg press. I freaking love single leg presses for glutes. Single leg presses for quads are awesome too if you put your foot down low on the platform. The problem with a glute dominant single leg press is you got to put your foot high up on the platform, and you want the back pad positioned up high. And when you do it in this manner, it's a very small range of motion for the hips. It's essentially a lengthened partial. It's so limited range, you're really not moving the hip through much range of motion. It's an awesome stretch position exercise, and it's super stable. The problem is I think you get a little more glute growth when you're erecting the torso and extending the thigh at the same time. I don't have any evidence of that. It's just a hunch, which is why it's not numero uno. But don't get me wrong, I absolutely love single leg presses. Coming at number 4 is the Bulgarian squat. A lot of you out there, especially on social media, this would be your favorite single leg glute exercise. So please don't get upset for the number 4 placement. They're a little hard to stabilize if you do barbell. If you do 2 dumbbells, it's a little bit easier to stabilize, but still some of the reps tend to be problematic. I like it more when you brace onto something, you use 1 dumbbell, but you can get too strong for that. I love Smith machine, Bulgarian split squats. I love plate loaded. You can use a deficit with these. They're so amazing, and they really work you best in a stretch position. You can lean forward, make them more glute dominant. They're such a great glute exercise, but anecdotally, people's glutes tend to get a little more sore from lunge variations. So I think lunges work your glutes a little more, and lunges don't make the number 1 spot because they work too well. They make your glutes too sore. You'll hear my explanation in a second about that. So you might be thinking, well, why not make them number 1 then? Because there is an exercise that I think is even better than the Bulgarian. And one other thing with the Bulgarian is it's really hard to not feel it in your quads. Even when you do it in a very glute dominant fashion, there's no way to slice it. It's an amazing quad exercise. And for that reason, some people don't love it as much as they should. So they can be your number 1 glute exercise. It's okay. We can agree to disagree. I love it. But let's move on to number 3. Coming in the top 3. Number 3 is the reverse lunge. Now, I like the barbell reverse lunge, but it's unstable. You can do these standing on flat ground or in a deficit. If you do a deficit, I recommend a slight deficit, not too much, maybe just a few inches. But barbell is a little too unstable. You tend to lose your balance. Same with barbell walking lunges. You tend to use your balance, but barbell walking lunges and dumbbell walking lunges are insane. They make your glutes more sore than any movement out there. You might be saying, then they're the best. The reason why they make your glutes so sore is because they work you so hard in the stretch position, which is a clear reason why they belong to be number 1. And I would agree with you if we all train glutes 1 day a week. week. So if you train legs one day a week or you train glutes one day a week, do walking lunges or reverse lunges. You'll be recovered. They probably are the best in terms of efficiency. The problem is they're too good. They make your glutes too sore. And therefore, if you train your glutes 3 times a week, say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you hit them hard on Monday or Wednesday, they're definitely interfering with your next glute workout. For this reason, I limit the volume. I only have my clients do 1 or 2 sets of these. Now, I will tell you, I like braced reverse lunges. I like flat reverse lunges more than the deficit. I think going to parallel, leaning forward, sitting back, is the best way to do them, but I think a slight deficit is fine too, just not too big of a deficit or you necessarily make it more quad dominant. And when you brace, you want to brace with the same side leg you're working and hold onto the dumbbell in the contralateral hand, the opposite hand, because that works a little more glute. But my favorite is the Smith machine reverse lunge, and I also like the plate loaded reverse lunge. I don't like the sliding reverse lunges because how do you know you're not using the sliding leg a lot? But I do want to mention, some of my clients get freakishly strong at these reverse lunges. On the Smith machine, I've had Allegra, Ashley, and Carly all hit 225 for 10, which is freaking brutal. I've also had Joa do walking barbell lunges with 225 pounds for 12 steps, so 6 with each leg. Phenomenal exercise, and most of my followers are women who train glutes 3 times a week, therefore they are too good. So if you train glutes 3 times a week, do these with less volume, 1 to 2 hard sets. So you might be thinking, if these are number 3, what are number 1 and 2? Well, I'm going to tell you the number 1 and 2 and give you a second to think about this. The remaining 2 exercises are the single leg RDL and the step up. Which one would you pick for numero uno? This was really hard to determine. Most of you would pick the single leg RDL at the number 1 spot, but I put it as number 2. Now, if you did barbell single leg RDLs, they would not be very effective. You're all over the place. It's really hard to get the coordination down pat. If you do dumbbells, it's a little bit better, but these are only really good if you brace, in my opinion. And most gyms only go up to 100 pounds. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I never do single leg RDLs with 100-pound dumbbells. Well, you can get that strong, especially if you're bracing, especially if you just know that you can load these up. My client Joa did 23 reps with the 100-pound dumbbell. The problem is, once you get that strong, it can be a lot on the sacrum, and you're limited by how much you can hold on one hand. Now, there's so many good single leg RDL variations. As I mentioned earlier, the B stance option is great. B stance RDLs are amazing, but you can also do them on the Smith machine. You can do them off like the hammer strength or like a plate loaded apparatus. My 2 favorite single leg RDL variations are actually the adducted single leg RDL, where you put your leg off to the side. I feel those so much in my glute, and you can turn in a little bit, kind of curtsy it if you want. And the other is the hip supported single leg RDL. I freaking love those, especially as you reach out a little bit, you can increase the torque loading on the hips. But some people always feel these in the hamstrings. As I mentioned earlier, it can be a lot on the SI joint for some people. I love them, they're so amazing, but they did not reach the number 1 spot because of the glute dominant step up. Another issue with this single leg RDL is that some women with like smaller upper bodies, when they get so strong, when they start using a 100-pound dumbbell, they feel it in their upper body a lot. It's tugging, it's pulling, they have smaller upper bodies than men. So men tend to tolerate the greater loading better than women in my experience, and that should be taken into account because most women are stronger with the hinge pattern than the squat pattern, and they can use more loading, and for some it can interfere with the effectiveness of the movement. So as you know by now, number 1 is the step up, and you might be saying, what? Why would it be the step up? People butcher these left and right. But I'm of the strong opinion that an exercise is to be judged by how it's supposed to be done, not by how all the newbies screw it up. So yes, you go watch people do step-ups. They plant off the grounded leg and fling up. They use a ton of momentum. They're all over the place. They're wobbly, uncoordinated. You can sometimes see people propel off their bottom leg and then catch themselves in a quarter squat position at the top and finish off bilaterally, which makes it a very poor glute exercise. You can also do high step-ups, which we love. High step-ups are very quad dominant. I love the high step up for quads, but when you do step ups in a glute dominant fashion, they're amazing. Now you need to be stable. If you're trying to do barbell step ups or even double dumbbell step ups, too unstable. You need to be braced for these, and you need to reach back, lean forward, and really feel that glute working on the way down. I made a post on glute dominant step ups, I think it was late 2022, and I feel like that's what sparked the step up craze on social media. It got so many views, it got so many shares, And after that, all the influencers started recommending them. But yeah, in my opinion, they are number one when you perform it correctly. You just go to parallel depth, parallel thigh position, lean forward, brace onto something, hold onto a dumbbell, or you could put an ankle weight on the back leg and brace with two arms, or you could use a cable column, but you're reaching back, controlling yourself all the way down. Think of it as a step down, because right before you touch down, that's when you really want to be controlling the weight, feeling the glute working in that stretch position. Barely tap down. Don't use the bottom leg for propulsion at all. Tap down, come right back up. Do it very intentional, very smooth and controlled. And when done in this manner, it is, in my opinion, the number one glute exercise. Some of you might be saying, well, it's the same exact movement pattern as the Bulgarian split squat and the reverse lunge, and it makes your glutes less sore. Why would it be number one? And that's exactly why it's number one. Some of you might have heard me review the Plotkin 2023 study, which compared squats to hip thrusts. They tied for glute growth. My opinion on that is that hip thrusts are better because you can do way more volume of hip thrusts. So when two exercises tie for muscle growth, then the superior movement is the one that beats you up less, that you can do more volume of. And in my experience, you can do glute dominant step-ups 3 days per week, unlike Bulgarians and reverse lunges. Just like hip thrusts, you can do hip thrusts 3 days a week, no problem. And that's important for maximizing your recoverable volume. Again, if you only train glutes 1 day a week, I'd recommend the reverse lunge. But when you bend the knee, the hamstring gets slackened. Therefore, you don't use the hamstring as much. You rely more on the glutes for hip extension, also the adductors. So when you train the glutes in a stretch position, you're also going to work a lot of adductors, but with the single leg RDL, you necessarily work a little more hamstring. With a step up, you necessarily work the quad and adductor a little more. If you're just looking for a pure glute exercise that doesn't work a lot of legs, then the cable kickback would probably be your optimal movement if you're just trying to grow the glutes without growing the legs. And one thing I do want to mention, this study that everyone likes to cite on social media, published by Dr. Walter Nito, a Brazilian researcher, excellent researcher, but he did a review paper on exercise and glute EMG, and he said the step up is the number one exercise that activates the glutes the best. That is not true. Hip thrusts get you a higher glute EMG, but the step up study that they referenced had different normalization procedures. It's kind of complicated, but basically they divided the EMG activity by an inferior position, a bent-legged isometric hip extension task, rather than the gold standard, which is bent leg hip extension in full hip extension against resistance applied to the manual thigh. That's the gold standard. When you use the same normalization procedures, hip thrusts get you way higher of glute EMG activity. But in the case of the Plotkin study, we did see that squats and hip thrusts led to the same growth, because hip thrusts probably produce more active force, squats more passive force, so it ended up being a tie. So EMG does not perfectly predict hypertrophy. It probably predicts active force really well, but not the stretch, which is why you always want to include both types of exercise into your glute training programs. You want to work the glutes in more of a stretch, and you want to work them more in the squeeze, and this list has it all. Lots of stretch position movements, lots of squeeze position movements. Now, what if you love the top two? You love the step up, you love the Romanian, you love Bulgarians. What if you wanted to combine the ultimate, single leg exercise? Now you could do what I call the Romanian Bulgarian. It's like half Romanian deadlift, half Bulgarian split squat. It's more knee dominant than a Romanian. It's more hip dominant than a Bulgarian. So it's kind of halfway in between. You don't see this often, but this is a cool variation you might want to try. And another honorable mention is the step down movement off of the assisted chin-up machines. I didn't include it in my top 20 because most of you would agree, you'd say, well, why not just do a step up? But I think if you wore a weighted vest on those to hold you down better and perform those in a glute dominant fashion, and it was a really good machine, I think those would be amazing as well. They'd probably be just as good as like single leg presses, but it's hard to get a really good machine for that. But you know what I'm talking about, the assisted chin-up machines, putting your foot on there and doing a step down, because it's a little more range than the leg press and you can make it just as glute dominant, but we don't carry on weighted vests, and people who want to do chin-ups and dips would just be pissed off at you for hogging the machine. We've gotten super creative over the years. Check out this variation of a dual elevated loaded single leg hip thrust using our rotisserie bar, our thruster pad bar, which swivels. This was an amazing glute exercise, but who in the heck would ever set this up? The point of me showing this is you can get creative, you can twist inwards, you can use dumbbells, kettlebells, bands, chains, barbells, Smith machines, plate loaded devices, machines, ipsilateral loading, contralateral loading, do thrust and bridge patterns, do hyper variations, do squat, lunge, step up, and leg press patterns. They all work the glute max very, very well. And the last thing I'm gonna say, you might be wondering, what about all the single leg abduction movements? You know, glute medius hip thrust, glute medius kickbacks, side lying hip raise, extra range single leg hip abductions, extra range fire hydrants. I love these exercises, but those work the upper glutes a little more, meaning the glute medius and minimus. And then some of them done in a transverse plane work the upper glute max well, but not so much the lower glute max, which is why they were not included. That's a wrap. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like this video because I work my butt off on these and they never get that many views. YouTube consistently does me dirty. That's why I don't post that much on here. Please share it. Please like it. Please leave a comment. Spread the word, because I don't think there are many people out there with as much experience with single leg movements than me. I've been lifting for 34 years, coaching for almost 30 years, and extensively studying the biomechanics of these movements for around 15 years. I love glute training. I love single leg glute training, and I hope you do too. I'm Bret Contreras, aka the Glute Guy.